much did the average guy that's just getting up in the morning and going out and feeding his animals and, taking care of his family and all that, how much did they actually realize about what was going on? I think about back when Noah was building that ark, and how the news on the TV that night, if they'd had a TV, would have been, tonight at 7, crazy old man persists in building a boat in the desert. And then subsequently there would have been one that said, weather report, slight chance of rain in the forecast. Is anyone paying attention to what's going on here when these 12 spies go into the land? Are they praying for them? Or are they going to base their faith on what people say rather than what God said? God said, I've already given you the land. Now, because the land was already theirs doesn't mean they weren't to be using some strategy to claim it. We have to know not only where we're going, but we have to know how we're going to get there. And so the plan begins. Israel sends 12 men, one from each tribe. I would have hoped that they would have picked the cream of the crop to go in there. Those who were visionaries and wanted to see what God was going to do. And they are to check out the land. They're to find out, is everything the way God said it would be? Very simple assignment. But as the story moves on, we see that although these 12 men all saw exactly the same thing, their interpretations of what they saw were very different. How many of you know that a lot of times the biggest obstacles in our life is not what's going on, but how we're looking at what's going on? And if we could change our perspective on it and see it from God's side, it wouldn't be such a big issue. So the 10, they say to the people, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are, and our wives and children will be taken as plunder. The cities are fortified and very large. We even saw the descendants of Anak, the huge men, the giants there. So there's 10 of them that look not at God and what God has already said He's given them, but they look at these people and they say they're bigger than we are. And then up, of course, come Caleb and later Joshua, who were the only 2 men of faith in that group of 12, and they said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. I love their spirit. He said, we shall swallow them up. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. Can't help but notice one of the humorous things about this is that the people of Israel grumbled against the leader, Moses and Aaron. And then against the Lord. Why did the Lord bring us out here into this land only to fall by the sword? All 12 men examined exactly the same data. Let me tell you something, folks. Sometimes the majority's wrong. Sometimes the majority's wrong. But also, equally true with that, all too often is the case, they listened to the majority and voted not to enter the land. Now, it's important to understand why the excuses that they made. Number one, they said there are giants in the land. The land's full of giants. The land was not full of giants. The land was full of people just like them. There might have been some descendants of Anak there. I'm willing to believe that. They were the basketball players of that day. Big guys. But they said, we can't go in because there are giants in the land. And secondly, we can't go in because their cities are walled. There's walls around the city. Now we know that there was a wall around the city of Jericho. It was a protective wall. But not all the cities. In fact, most of the cities weren't walled. And then thirdly, they hide behind their wives' skirts and say, our wives and children will be taken captive. And we don't want them to be taken captive. See, our concern is really for our family. So what happens then is that they are stuck between 2 worlds. What a terrible place to be. They're not in Egypt. They're not in bondage any longer. But neither are they willing to go in and claim the land that God said He had already given them. Now keep your mind on that, because what we're going to be looking at here is, in a minute, what God has said to us. As judgment for their unbelief, God told them that they were going to spend the next 40 years as wilderness wanderers. 1 year for every day they spent spying out the land. 1 year for every day. All of the men of military age who did not claim God's promised land, God says they're going to die in the wilderness, and which means basically, if you look at the book of Numbers, they're going to have 603 funerals in the next 40 years. 603 what? 1,000 funerals in the next 40 years, and that's just the men. I'm telling you, life was just one big parade of funerals. But then God says to them, their children, who they used as an excuse to cover their unbelief, are going to go in, and they're going to inherit the land. So instead of inheriting their own land flowing with milk and honey, a faithful and fruitful and prosperous land, because of their unbelief, it's going to be manna and minimum daily requirement for the next 40 years. In other words, to put it bluntly, it's going to be oatmeal every day for 40 years. I don't know. Some people, my father-in-law, he could do that forever. But I'm not one of the all-time great oatmeal fans. I tolerate it. But the point is, of course, instead of going to the land flowing with milk and honey with all the blessings, they're going to settle for minimum daily requirements. And as we shall see, Joshua and Caleb are going to be the only two men of all of those military-age men that actually make the whole journey. They're the only two men that actually go all the way out of Egypt and into the promised land. They're the only two. Now, many other people did too, but not those that had unbelief. And even though they had to wait 40 years to do so, the reason that they did was because of the unbelief of the other Israelites. In other words, sometimes other people's unbelief can hold us back from experiencing God's best. Now, what does all this mean to you and I? I think there's so much to learn from this. You know, I believe this literally happened, but I also believe that the example to us is tremendous. First of all, the land was already theirs. See, when God delivered them, listen to this carefully, He didn't deliver them out of Israel to wander in the wilderness. He delivered them out of Egypt. You know, you're going to have to adjust your thinking with me. I say things backwards sometimes. Out of Egypt, He wanted to deliver them out of Egypt and into the promised land. He didn't deliver them to live as wilderness wanderers. Now, the promised land, I want us to clearly understand. I know we sing a lot of songs in our hymnals, like "On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wistful eye." And they speak of the time to cross over Jordan as the time when we die and go to heaven. But the promised land in our illustration here is not a picture of heaven. How do you know, Pastor? Because heaven's not full of what and what? Well, no, it is full of milk and honey. But what is not full of? Giants and walled cities. You don't have to go in and conquer heaven. It's already been conquered in Jesus Christ. The promised land pictures all of the wonderful and abundant life that God has for the believer in Jesus Christ. What? Right now. Right now. See, when God saves you, He doesn't save you out of bondage to live, listen, a life of predictable monotony. He doesn't save us to live a life of humdrum, ho-hum daily living. He delivers us to live a life of wonderful zest and zeal in the Holy Spirit. Read God's incredible promises. You know, sometimes we slip over these in the Bible when we're reading it, and we don't, you know, I'm a great believer in, man, you got to nail these things in your mind. Look at 2 Peter 1:3. Now, let's just take this literally for a moment, okay? Because that's